NASCAR banned Ford's 427 single overhead cam engine before it ever turned a lap in competition. The Cammer made 616 horsepower straight from the factory, and Bill France took one look at the dyno sheets and said no. This is the story of the engine so dominant that racing's most powerful sanctioning body killed it sight unseen. The year was 1963, and Ford had a problem. Henry Ford II had declared total war on General Motors. He wanted Ford racing everywhere, winning everything, and cost didn't matter. The company hired away half of GM's top engineers, threw unlimited money at racing development, and told their teams one thing: destroy Chevrolet. They succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. By early 1964, Ford's 427 wedge engine dominated NASCAR so thoroughly that Chrysler pulled out of racing entirely. Richard Petty, the king himself, parked his Plymouth and went home. Junior Johnson was winning races in Ford Galaxies. Tiny Lund took the Daytona 500. Ford swept the top positions at tracks across the country. That's how badly Ford was winning. But instead of celebrating, Ford's racing division saw something terrifying in Chrysler's retreat. Chrysler wasn't quitting. They were regrouping. The rumors coming out of Highland Park said they were building something called a Hemi. And the whispers from inside Chrysler's engineering department suggested this wasn't just another engine. This was going to change everything. Ford's engineers knew what a hemispherical combustion chamber meant. Better airflow, more power, higher RPM capability. If Chrysler came back with a race-spec Hemi, Ford's wedge head design would be obsolete overnight. The wedge head worked fine, but it had physical limitations. The valves sat at an angle in a wedge-shaped chamber, which restricted flow at high RPM. A proper hemispherical chamber let the valves sit opposite each other with a straight shot of air between them. Physics said the Hemi would breathe better. Physics was right. So Ford went nuclear. The directive was simple and absolutely insane. Build an engine that could make 600 horsepower in street trim, survive 24 hours at racing speeds, and do it with production-based components. Oh, and have it ready in 6 months. Most companies would have laughed at that timeline. Ford had a running prototype in 4 months. The 427 SOHC took Ford's proven 427 side oiler block and completely reimagined the top end. Instead of push rods and rocker arms, they designed a single overhead camshaft for each cylinder bank. The camshafts sat directly over the valves, driven by a 6-foot timing chain that ran from the crankshaft up the front of the engine. When you popped the hood on a Cammer, that massive chain drive housing dominated everything. It looked like something from an industrial machine, not a car. The valve covers stood nearly as tall as the carburetor. Each cam rode in 7 main bearings for stability at high RPM. The timing chain itself was 3/4 of an inch wide and required constant oil pressure to keep the tensioners working. Ford could only build 3 complete engines per day because the precision machining required was that intensive. The cam towers had to be line bored to within thousandths of an inch. The timing chain alignment needed to be perfect or the whole system would tear itself apart at racing speeds. This wasn't a parts bin special. This was engineering at the absolute edge of what Ford's production capabilities could handle. The first dyno test happened in December 1964. The Cammer was loaded with a single 4-barrel carburetor, a mild camshaft, and restrictive exhaust manifolds. This was the tame version, the one they'd theoretically sell to the public. The operator brought the engine up to 6,000 RPM and held it there. The dyno readout climbed past 500 horsepower, then 550. It settled at 616 horsepower and 515 pound-feet of torque in street trim with a single carburetor. Somebody asked what would happen with the racing setup. Dual 4 barrels, open headers, wild camshaft. The answer came back: over 700 horsepower, possibly 750, and it would run all day at 7,000 RPM without braking. Ford had just built the most powerful production-based V8 engine in American history. Now here's where the story gets complicated. NASCAR's rulebook in 1964 required any racing engine to be available in a production car. You had to build at least 500 units and offer them for sale to the public. That was the homologation rule, designed to keep pure race engines off the track. Ford knew this. They'd already announced plans to offer the Camry as a dealer-installed option. You could theoretically walk into a Ford dealership, order a Galaxy or Fairlane, and check the box for the 427 SOHC engine. Ford set the price at $2,200 for a complete engine. That's $21,000 in today's money. But there was a catch. Actually, there were several catches. First, no Ford production car could physically fit the Camry under the hood. The engine was too tall. You'd need to modify the hood, the shock towers, probably the firewall. Second, the engine required so much machining that Ford could barely produce 3 per day. Meeting the 500-unit requirement would take 6 months of dedicated production. Third, and this is the one that mattered, Bill France didn't care about any of that. Bill France founded NASCAR and ran it like his personal kingdom. When Ford submitted the 427 SOHC for approval in early 1965, France had already seen what happened when manufacturers brought exotic engines to his tracks. Chrysler's new 426 Hemi had debuted at Daytona in February and finished first, second, and third. Ford's existing 427 Wedge couldn't compete. The Hemi walked away from every Ford on the track. France knew that if he approved the Camry, NASCAR would turn into a two-manufacturer arms race between Ford and Chrysler. The racing would be spectacular, but it would destroy the sport's economics. Chevrolet would quit because they had nothing that could compete. Independent teams running older equipment wouldn't have a prayer. Every team would need either a Hemi or a Camry just to be competitive, and both engines cost serious money. France could see the future clearly. Two manufacturers spending whatever it took to beat each other. Everyone else watching from the sidelines. Ticket sales declining because fans couldn't relate to exotic race engines that had nothing to do with the cars they could buy. The sport would become a corporate spending contest, and France would lose control. So he made a decision that would haunt Ford for the next decade. He banned the 427 SOHC from NASCAR competition. Not because it violated the rules, because it scared him. The official reason was that the engine didn't meet production requirements. France claimed Ford hadn't actually built 500 units. Ford countered that they'd built the engines and would sell them to anyone who wanted one. France said the engines had to be installed in production cars, not sold as dealer options. Ford pointed out that Chrysler's Hemi was available the exact same way. France didn't care. The ban stood. The 427 SOHC would never race in NASCAR. Ford was furious. They'd spent millions developing an engine specifically to beat Chrysler in NASCAR, and France had outlawed it before the first green flag. Henry Ford II seriously considered pulling Ford out of all NASCAR competition. His racing directors talked him down, barely. But here's the thing about building the most powerful engine in America. Even if NASCAR won't let you race it, somebody's going to find a place to run it. The Camry found its home in drag racing, and that's where the engine finally got to show what it could do. The engine's combination of massive horsepower and bulletproof reliability made it perfect for quarter-mile racing. The overhead cam design meant the valve train could handle 7,500 RPM all day long without floating valves or breaking rocker arms. The side oiler block kept oil pressure consistent even under the most violent acceleration. And that 616 horsepower in street trim, that was just the starting point. Gas Ronda put a Camry in his Mustang funny car and ran 7.90 seconds at 175 miles per hour in 1966. That was science fiction performance for the era. Most street cars couldn't even reach 100 miles per hour, and Ronda was crossing the finish line at 175. Connie Kalita built an entire top fuel operation around Camry engines and became one of the most successful drag racers of the late 1960s. The NHRA tried to restrict it with weight penalties and displacement limits, but the Camry kept winning. It ran in top fuel dragsters, funny cars, pro stock Mustangs, and even offshore powerboat racing. Anywhere you could run an engine at full throttle for less than 10 seconds, the Camry dominated. The engine Ford built for NASCAR found its glory on the drag strip instead. Ford officially produced 657 complete 427 SOHC engines between 1965 and 1967. Some went to professional racers who understood what they were getting. Some went to wealthy enthusiasts who wanted the ultimate Ford engine in their collection. A few ended up in street cars, though fitting them required serious modification work. You had to cut the shock towers, modify the hood, sometimes even move the firewall back. And once you got it installed, you had an engine that made every gas station a mandatory stop and required constant maintenance. But the people who ran Camrys didn't care about practicality. They cared about having the engine NASCAR was too afraid to face. They cared about owning a piece of the war between Ford and Bill France. They cared about driving something that represented no compromises and no limits. Today, a genuine Camry engine in rebuildable condition sells for $40,000 to $60,000. A complete, dyno-tested engine can bring $100,000. A pristine example with documented racing history might command even more. These aren't just rare engines. They're the ones that got away, the weapon Ford built that NASCAR refused to face. The 427 SOHC represents everything the muscle car era was supposed to be. An American manufacturer building an engine so powerful that the sanctioning body had to ban it. No compromises, no limits, just pure engineering excellence aimed at total domination. That's why enthusiasts still talk about the Camry 60 years later. Chrysler's 426 Hemi gets all the glory. It won races, powered legendary muscle cars, and became a cultural icon. But the Hemi raced because NASCAR allowed it. The 427 SOHC never got that chance. Ford built the ultimate assassin, and Bill France locked it in the garage before it could prove what it could do. That makes the Camry something even more legendary than a race winner. It's the greatest engine that never was. The what if that haunts NASCAR history. And if you ask any Ford enthusiast who remembers the 1960s what engine they wish they could have seen race, the answer is always the same. The Camry, Ford's assassin. The engine so dominant it got banned before it ever turned a lap.